Temporal Archive 113309. Subject: Anomaly found by Egyptologist Sir Howard Carter. Date: November 4th. Time: 1326. Year: 1922. Location: Valley of the Kings. 300 meters north from the River Nile West Bank. 10 meters from entrance of main King's Chamber.
Howard, my dear man, how are you?
Lady Cornelia, what an absolute pleasure, but what on earth possesses you to make such an arduous journey down here? If I'd known you were going to call on me, I could have arranged a more suitable setting and refreshments.
Nonsense, Howard. I can be a lady in any setting, but thank you. That's very sweet of you. And remember, it is 1922 and the modern woman is willing to have the hem of her skirt ruffled now and again. But really, Howard, how very old-fashioned of you. I wanted to see all of this for myself.
Then see it you shall, my dear Cornelia. If I may, up you come.
Oh,
please join me.
Such a gentleman.
If you'd allow me to lead you into what I'm calling the King's Chamber. This way, my dear.
Howard, before we begin, what are those intriguing marks? There, do you see? Above the door, on the stone, there, do you see?
My dear woman, those are the ancient writings of the dynastic peoples of ancient Egypt. Shall I translate them for you?
Oh, how exciting. Yes, please do, you clever man.
Now, let's see. Bartanet, Hisnatus, Krish Anotepe, Lesh Anotepe.
And that would mean?
It reads, the Slick podcast was here.
Sounds absolutely dreadful. And what is a slick podcast?
I really have no idea.
Oh.
You have tuned in for a Slick podcast. I'm here to seek the truth. Live from Scotland around the UK. The one and only Slick podcast. Enjoy the show. Can I ask important questions? No matter how bizarre the truth might be. Tune in for Slick Podcast. Keeping it real, keeping it groovy.
Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, or a very good day to you when and wherever you're listening from. And a very warm welcome to the show. I'm your host, Simon Laurie King. Coming up on today's show, my guest is a champion of self-help and improvement, stage hypnotist, and an expert on mind manipulation for the good of the self, breaking habits and phobias, and also the way these techniques can and have been used for nefarious agendas throughout our history. Jonathan Royale started his journey at a very young age in the spotlight as Britain's youngest circus clown, and went on to learn the art of hypnosis and qualify as a practitioner at just 14 years old. Throughout his personal traumas and triumph, he has honed his skill and helped and entertained hundreds of people around the world on stage and on television. He is the author of the book Hypnotherapy Made Easy, Mastering the Art of NLP and Hypnosis, Stage Hypnosis Made Easy, How to Become a Comedy Hypnotist, the Encyclopedia of Hypnotherapy, Stage Hypnosis and Complete Mind Therapy, and the one we shall be talking about today, Shitnosis, helping you get over the shit in your life and get your shit together. Jonathan has also made a documentary titled Extreme Danger, Extreme Hypnosis, the truth about mind controlled exposed. A good one to watch and definitely an eye-opener. I've wanted to talk with Jonathan for a while now and have a conversation about a subject that both fascinates and intrigues me. Fortunately, I managed to get an hour of his time from his busy schedule. So without further delay, it's my absolute pleasure to welcome Jonathan Royale to the show.
Hi, Simon. It's great to be here.
Let's get the ball rolling on this one. Jonathan, you are, amongst other things, a very well-known stage hypnotist and have appeared on television, radio and other talk shows around the world. You are an author and what I would term a personal development counsellor. You have produced a documentary titled Extreme Danger, Extreme Hypnosis, which I can absolutely recommend watching to my listeners. There will be a link at the end of the show on the show notes. You use NLP techniques in your work, helping others, and the list goes on. But first of all, let's start off by you telling us about your very unique early background.
Yeah, well, it's I would deem it batshit crazy, and to be brutally honest, if it hadn't happened to me, I would probably think if somebody was to relate some of the things I'm about to mention that they were there was some kind of strange fantasist, which is one of the reasons why I have a website. There's nothing for sale on it. It's literally just a page of links to independent third-party media articles, companies, photographs, video evidence, stuff that proves what I'm about to say isn't batshit crazy. And that's, well, it's still batshit crazy. It's just that it proves it genuinely happened to me. And that's magicalguru.co.uk. So, yeah, I was born on the 13th of August, 1978, into a show business family whilst my parents were travelling with Gandhi's Circus here in England. And as is the circus tradition, to get people involved as early as possible. By the time I was 3 and a bit, in late 1978, I became Britain's, Europe's, possibly at the time, the world's youngest professional paid circus clown, as Flap the Clown with the big red nose, crazy grey wig and silly outfit. Photographs people can have a good laugh at are on that website link I mentioned. And that's where the madness began. Although to me it didn't seem like madness at that time, because obviously to me that was my perception of normal environment, because it was what I was born into. So I look back on it now and I think, wow, far from normal. I mean, some bizarre highlights in a negative fashion. We're at the age of 4 and a bit. I was playing hide and seek on the circus, and I went and hid underneath the lion tamer's caravan. And I didn't realise that chained up underneath it was a baby puma, P-U-M-A, puma. I did say, as in the wild cat. And lo and behold, it was somewhat startled to see me having crawled underneath that trailer into its personal space, and decided to start pawing me and playfully biting me. And I say that kind of slightly sarcastically because I am advised that if it was being vicious, I would have been dead in next to no time. Whereas rather I was fortunate enough to get saved by the lion tamer hearing me screaming for my life, but not before my left ear had been ripped off and had to be surgically reattached. And I've got claw mark scars on my head and down my back. So that was an odd traumatic experience growing up. Then again, I'm only about 5, and we had the people in England. If you're elsewhere in the world, go on YouTube and type in P for Polly, G for green. That's PG, chimpanzee, T adverts. And you'll see the adverts that ran in the 70s, the 80s, possibly even into the early 90s, but then they were stopped, where they dressed up chimpanzees and dubbed voices on them to advertise this Brook Bond PG Tips tea. Well, those chimpanzees came touring with the circus one summer, and I'd be walking to the side of the stage if we were in a theatre, or to the ring doors, as they call it in a circus, getting ready to go on to do the next bit with my dad, Tizzy the Clown. And the PG chimps would have just done their act and would have left the circus ring or the stage, and there was another act on stage. So they were leaving, there was an act on, and me and my dad were going to get ready to be the next act on. So invariably, we crossed the path of Billy Day, the chimpanzee trainer, and his chimpanzees, two of which he'd be holding the hands of. And basically, as we walked past them, my dad would always say, "You're all right, Billy," and Billy would go, "You're all right, Tiz." And in that very moment, that very second, that very instant, when my dad was distracted and Billy was distracted, whichever of the chimpanzees was nearest to me used to clout me around the head. Now, I'm advised in later years that they've got such strength, chimpanzees, that if it was being vindictive or nasty, it'd probably knock me unconscious. So I've been told it's more likely because I was only 5 and, quite short, kind of roughly their sort of height, that they were just being playful. However, to me, the 5-year-old, that was another traumatic experience. And there were numerous things went from bad to worse, because then my mum decided that she wanted me to have a sort of normal upbringing, whatever normal means, and decided rather than me travelling town to town and going to different schools, that we should settle somewhere, get a house, I go to one school, and my dad continue with the circus, and me just go and perform in the evenings, at weekends, school holidays and whatnot. And that's what happened. Unfortunately, I was starting to get national media attention. And at the age of 6, in the Daily Mirror, there was a headline, "Alex, the circus six it." The article's on that webpage I mentioned earlier. Going on about how I was the youngest paid circus clown. And when my teachers saw this at the school that I was at that time, they started to become nasty, vindictive. I can only basically say that they were bullying me on a daily basis, and I never knew why. Looking back, I can only assume it's because I was getting this publicity, and the perception was that I earned more. I got a higher hourly rate when I did perform than they earned. In any event, it made my life a living hell, to the point where I begged to go to a different school, but there wasn't another school in close proximity, and my mum didn't have transport at the time. Eventually, by the time I was 8, we moved town, and I started at a different school, where I'm delighted to say that the teachers were fantastic. They never once bullied me or criticised me. They were fully supportive in everything. Can't praise them enough. Unfortunately, when I started appearing in the media again, many of the pupils started to bully me as being the odd one out, for being a circus clown's son, for being in the media, also because I've got ginger hair, and also for being slightly deaf, because, my ear had been ripped up by a puma, which many of them didn't believe. So, I'd get accused of being a liar, even though teachers told them no, they were aware it was all true because they'd seen the proof. So this happened on a daily basis, and it had a negative impact on my mental health, my self-esteem, my confidence. And to jump forward a bit, basically, by the time I was about 12, just about to start going to high school, secondary school, I'd had enough. And it occurred to me, it was winter time where it got darker quicker in the evenings. It occurred to me, if I lay down in the middle of the busiest main road where I lived, that the traffic wouldn't see me, and it'd all be over and done with pretty quickly. So I did. I lay down in the road and lay there for what seemed like forever. But since then, I've learnt that time is a weird thing, because I honestly don't know how long I was lay there. But I know this, since you can bump into a friend that you've not seen for years, go for a coffee with them, think you've been talking for like 15 minutes, then look at your watch and realise you've actually been talking for a couple of hours. And conversely, you can end up going to a job interview, for example, being really nervous, going in, thinking you've been sat, been in there for half an hour or longer, and leave the room and then look at your watch and you've been in there less than 10 minutes. So time's a weird construct. All I know is that I got fed up of lying in the road because no traffic came. So I stood up, started making my way back to the pavement. I put one foot onto the pavement, and the moment that foot connected with the pavement, I heard a massive whoosh. and felt this backdraft, and I turned my head to the side and I saw a massive articulated lorry had just whooshed past, followed by cars, followed by more trucks. And in that moment, well, basically I shit myself, and suddenly I had a moment of clarity of, you're lucky, you're still alive. And with that thought of, hey, you're lucky, you're still alive, I realised that ending it all wasn't the best thing. And, you know, in later life, I've actually seen online, if people search for, you know, testimony from suicide survivors, people who've jumped off or from multi-storey buildings, albeit they may have survived with life-changing injuries. What they all say is that they felt they had too many issues to deal with, and that's what drove them to jump off or out of that multi-storey building. And yet the moment they jumped out or off it, they realised they only had one problem. And that one problem was that they just jumped out or off that building and were hurtling towards the floor. It kind of gives you this clarity, this focus. And that was the moment when I decided I've got to find a better way to feel better about myself. I've got to find a way to overcome the negativity of the bullies. If I can, I need to find a way to stop the bullies from bullying me. And I started at secondary school, and things went from bad to worse because it became not just verbal daily bullying. And incidentally, anyone who said sticks and stones will break my bones, but names will never hurt me was talking complete bullshit. Words are like weapons and can wound and go real deep and cause massive damage, especially through long-term repetition. But when I got to high school, it became daily physical bullying as well. And then I started reading self-help books I found at the library, and in one of them I learned a few different techniques. And it was a book by a man called Emile Coué, E-M-I-L-E, Emile Coué, C-O-U-E, who's famous for the personal positive self-affirmation of every day, in every way, I'm getting better and better. And I started using these positive affirmations to try and make myself feel a bit better. And it did to a degree, but, you know, there were still issues. But I learned a thing he called the law of reversed effort, which is the idea that what resists persists, that you get more of what you focus on in life. It's why stage hypnotists, when they get you to put your hands together and imagine that they're locking, gluing, welding, cementing, bolting together, at the end they'll go, now try to separate your hands. The more you try, the more they stick, lock, glued, weld, cement, because that word try implies that it's possible to fail. And when your mind grasps hold of that suggestion, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy and becomes reality. I also call it the Star Wars syndrome. It's like Yoda saying to Luke Skywalker, do or do not, there is no try. Another thing I learned from that book was a thing called pattern interrupts, which is something that in neurolinguistic programming they talk about, but they also talk about it years ago in hypnosis. It's this idea that as human beings, our mind stores everything in the memory banks of our personal desktop computers, our unconscious, subconscious mind, imagination, call it what you will. And when we go into a situation, our unconscious mind, without us consciously being aware of it, quickly goes through the computer file and finds something that pattern matches the situation we're currently in, assuming that there is a prior experience that relates to it. If there isn't, that's when panic can set in, or fear, because it's an unfamiliar situation. However, for an example of this is if I walked up to you and put my hand out, Simon, your natural instinct will be to put your hand out, our hands to connect, and us to shake hands. It's in many countries what people are programmed and conditioned happens when somebody places their arm out to you. However, you see, if I suddenly put my hand out towards you and you came towards it as though you were going to shake my hand, and instead of connecting with your hand, I took hold of your wrist and then moved your hand towards your face and said, as you stare at your hand, as your hand comes towards your face, your eyes are starting to get heavy and tired, and you start to realise that you just close your eyes down there, and there'll be a few other things that I'd say. That would not match the pattern of the files in your personal desktop computer, your memory bank. And so your conscious mind will go, what the effing hell's going on? And you go into a state of disorientation and confusion. And while your conscious mind was disorientated and confused, the critical faculty, analytical area, executive function, or nightclub bouncer of the mind, as I like to refer to it, would get sensory overload and go, I've had enough of this. I don't know what's going on. I'm going for a coffee break. And at that moment, any suggestions or commands I gave you will go directly into your laptop computer and instantly be acted upon without any critical analysis, which is kind of a description of what a hypnotist does, or an influencer or a persuader, because, you know, politicians do that sometimes, teachers do it, authority figures in general who know how to communicate do these things. So I went to sleep, woke up literally the next day having read these things, and I had a plan, and I had nothing to lose because I was getting physically hit and verbally bullied anyway. So that next day at school, when the bully approached me, normally they would pin me against the wall by my throat, give me a load of verbal nonsense, and then hit me and then walk off with their entourage laughing. Well, this day, as I saw the hand coming towards me, I didn't wait for it to connect. I just started saying, why don't you just forget all that nonsense you normally do? Just try. If you're going to hit me, try and hit me now. Go on, do it. And just as his hand connected to my throat, I could see his eyes kind of glaze over, and that look of what the hell's going on here, that confusion and disorientation, like the rabbit caught in the headlights, the freeze bit of fight, flight, freeze that the book had talked about. And I thought, hang on, this is working. This pattern interrupt stuff's working. And the word try, the law of reversed effort's working. So I said, go on, try and hit me now. And I kept saying it. And then suddenly he let go of me, turned to his little crowd of cronies and said, follow me, fellas. And as he walked off, he said, don't you effing come anywhere near me again. And I thought, hey, don't worry, I'm not going to do. And that was the day that I learned words with the correct applied psychological principles can also be massively life-changing in a positive way. And it led me to reading more and more self-help books. And by the time I was 14, to bring this rather long answer, to an end, I became the youngest ever certified clinical hypnotherapist member of the Association of Professional Hypnotherapists and it was called parapsychologists then, and then it changed its name to the Association of Professional Hypnotherapists and Psychotherapists. And at age 14, I passed their exam, became a member. And from that day on, I've been helping other people to overcome their habits, addictions, fears, phobias, panic attacks, anxiety, you name it, everything you can think of from A through to Z. But more importantly, albeit it took me about 5 years to do it. So at 14, I started helping other people. But I forgot to use the techniques on myself because I was feeling good about helping other people. That made me feel better, but it didn't fully deal with those traumas and releasing them from my unconscious mind. It didn't fully reprogram the personal laptop computer. There was still negative shit running around in it, negative programs. But I was feeling better because I was helping other people. Then, because I'd not dealt with those underlying traumas and negativity, in my later teenage years, I started smoking, drinking too much, taking cannabis, cocaine. Until one day I woke up and went, what the hell are you doing? You're helping other people stop smoking, lose weight, stop taking cannabis, cocaine, feel better about themselves. Why don't you use the same bloody techniques on yourself? And I did. And the moment I did, not only did I save a whole bunch of money, become healthier, but physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, on all levels, but I felt a damn sight better about myself because I finally processed those traumatic frozen in time incidents that were in my personal laptop computer, the unconscious, subconscious mind. I was able to let go of all that fear, failure, frustration, anger, anguish, anxiety, resentment, regret, remorse, all that self-blame, shame, guilt, and regret. And it's like a massive weight being lifted off my shoulders. And it helped me get my shit together, which ironically is why my most recent book release which I'm most proud of because it's my best book ever, I think, is called Shitnosis, helping you get over the shit in your life and get your shit together. And it's basically a book full of the exact techniques I used to change my life and change the lives of thousands of other people over the past 33, 34 years.
I must admit, I mean, firstly, you said, sorry about the long answer. Don't, because this show's about you today, Jonathan. So just take as long as you need. But a lot of that you were talking about, the trauma that you went through as a young child to the beginnings of adolescence really did smack of, to me, things like Michael Jackson, like the mind programming. I know we're going to touch on some of those things, but such trauma at such a young age, both physical and mental, you know, the familiarity of of a home or a home life, which you're obviously taken out of and then put into a home, as in a static home, you know, like most people take for granted you live here, but that was, so that doesn't, so that was you. There's no way you could have covered that in a few sentences. So we'll just move on. But before I ask you about your documentary, which I found very informative and, to put it mildly, quite worrying. Also, you've already touched on this a little bit, but could you explain the acronym NLP? What is it, and how is it used to help your clientele?
Okay, NLP. This will upset some NLP practitioners out there, but NLP is bullshit in so much as NLP stands for neuro-linguistic programming. Neuro, the mind, linguistic, words, programming speaks for itself. All it is basically is a repackaging of hypnosis and suggestion techniques, so that the creators of it, Richard Bandler and John Grinder, Richard Bandler especially, could use their NLP techniques and help people go into different states, as they called it, change their state, whereas in hypnosis it was always referred to as trance. Reprogramming in NLP relates to what in hypnosis will be called hypnotic commands or suggestions. And the motive for doing this, there were some states in America where you weren't allowed to use hypnosis for therapy unless you had certain medical qualifications. But by giving it all different names, suddenly you can use the techniques because you're not using the terminology that's banned. And that's essentially what it is. I jokingly say that NLP actually stands for nonsensically long pantomime, because the things that NLP can help people achieve, I can help people achieve more rapidly by teaching them how to hypnotize themselves and reprogram their personal laptop computer. So I'm actually not really a big fan of NLP.
But some people would use it for nefarious reasons, and obviously we're going to be talking about what I term as mesmerism. The world is in a state of mesmerism, and I know it's kind of old school. I've read a lot about you. I've seen a lot of your things, and you can mesmerize people, hypnotize people. But before we move on to the next question, would I be right in saying that an NLP technique could be as simple as just talking to someone and mentioning coffee, and then how is your thing, and mentioning coffee, and blah, blah, mentioning coffee, almost to suggest to them to make you a coffee or to buy that brand of coffee? Or am I not getting this right here? Just a simple example of how NLP could be used.
What we've related is, a kind of technique and advertising. Forget the phrase NLP. NLP is just a marketing brand for a whole bunch of techniques that ultimately, at the end of the day, are nothing more than emotional or psychological manipulation techniques. The same with hypnosis. There's no such thing as hypnosis. Hypnosis exists only in the mind of the believer. What hypnosis truly is not some special trance state. It is the use of psychological and emotional manipulation techniques, either used positively with positive intent, as I would do in hypnotherapy to help people overcome habits, addictions, fears and phobias, or used quite often scaringly, with nefarious intent by advertisers to get people to buy things they may never have wanted, by politicians to convince and persuade people to vote for a party they may not have done, by governments to control, influence and persuade the majority of the mass populace into thinking certain things or doing certain things. It's all around us, every area of life. Anything that influences, persuades, or nudges you in a certain direction is arguably NLP, is arguably hypnosis, is arguably suggestion, is arguably mind control. They're just all different names for emotional and psychological persuasion, really.
So before we move on to my next question about your documentary, I've just been reminded, as I've been listening to, about trance states. And I was having a conversation with a friend of mine a couple of weeks ago. And we were talking about daydreaming, and I was always told at school, you stop daydreaming. And to me, a lot of people pay a lot of money to try and get that back, and they call it meditation. But as children, we're discouraged to do it. Can you just comment on that at the moment and the benefit of being able to do that? And then we'll move on to the next question, because I really do want to talk about the motivation for your documentary. But just please, if you wouldn't mind, I know it's a little bit
of course.
Thank you.
Well, it isn't actually, because you see, when you're born, we're all blank canvases, and there's no critical faculty, analytical area, or executive function, as it gets called, of the brain. That doesn't kind of kick in until around puberty or shortly afterwards. So until then, we're like sponges that soak everything up. We're highly suggestible, and because we operate largely from the imagination, the subconscious, unconscious mind, there's no critical filter in place yet. That's why kids imagine things, and, you know, they have imaginary friends, or they're wonderful at playing games and whatnot. And daydreaming is another term for that. It basically means that somebody has gone into an alpha. There's different brainwave states: beta, alpha, theta, delta, BATD. I remember it as BAT, 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 and D for dung, bat dung. That's how I remember the order, but it's beta, alpha, theta, delta. Now, beta is like when you beta test something. It's its basic form. That's consciousness, being wide awake. Alpha is the letter A. A is also the start of the word air. So I remember it as being having my head in the clouds, up in the air, which reminds me of daydreaming. And that's what the alpha state is, daydreaming. Theta, 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 begins with the letter T, which is also the first letter of the word trance. And that's what I refer to as being kind of the state of hypnosis. But as hypnosis doesn't exist, I have to say that that's the confused, disorientated, cat in the headlights state where the critical faculty analytical area is bypassed even more, so that you act instinctively on what's instructed to the unconscious, subconscious mind. And D for delta, well, D also stands for dreaming, and that is nighttime, snory, fast asleep, sleep. So the benefits of the daydreaming, or even pushing it further forward into the theta state, which daydreaming can sometimes fringe into, is that what is purely imaginary at one moment, the next minute can seem very real indeed, which is great when you are focused on positive things, enjoyable things, pleasurable things, things that will be beneficial to you in all areas of your life. It is, however, potentially very dangerous when that critical faculty, analytical area, executive function, call it what you will, has been metaphorically put to sleep or gone on a coffee break type of thing, that there's no critical analysis of the input of what's going in. So if somebody with nefarious intent presents something as being positive and it goes into your personal laptop computer without being analysed, in truth, loads of negative shit can be getting in as well. So it can be both positive and negative. Now, from a positive point of view, as I teach in my book, Hypnosis, you can use self-hypnosis, guided meditation, call it what you will, techniques to help the critical faculty metaphorically go to sleep. It's like the nightclub bouncer of the mind going on a coffee break, so that you can get access to the control room of your brain, your personal desktop computer, go in and metaphorically install antivirus software for your brain, delete the negative programs, release any frozen in time traumas that might be there, delete all the shit that you've been walking around with, self-blame, shame, guilt, regret, all that stuff, and install positive, make you feel good stuff. And that's a positive use for it.
Any parent should not discourage daydreaming. Obviously, there is a time for it, if the child needs to be concentrating, but I think that's a waste of
Couldn't
childhood.
agree with you more. Could not agree with you more.
That's what you're the expert. I wanted to ask that as well. So let's just move on. Your documentary, which can be found on YouTube, titled "Extreme Danger, Extreme Hypnosis," lifts the veil, as it were, as to how easily suggestion can be implanted into we as individuals or masses through various techniques, and how thus enabling of nefarious, to coin a phrase again, agendas can be then instigated. Talk to us about this concept, the documentary, and why you decided to make it.
Yeah, well, the documentary's full title's Extreme Danger, Extreme Hypnosis, subtitled It's Time for the Sleepwalking Zombies to Wake Up. It's a 1 hour, 50-minute long documentary. Everyone can go and find it free of charge. That's relevant for a reason I'll mention in a minute. On my Celebrity Hypnotist YouTube channel, there is a playlist there called Extreme Danger, Extreme Hypnosis, where the documentary is. And then also, because we cover numerous areas of life in that documentary, we might only spend 5 minutes on politics, 5 minutes on the school system, 7 minutes on religion, 12 minutes on the lamestream legacy media. We can only skirt around things to a certain degree. So there is also in that playlist a web series of different episodes where we expand on each of the subjects further into more detail. Now, the motive of it was that I've had bizarre experiences in my life, but on my website, circusofthemind.net, I talk about my somewhat backfired attempt to try and expose the dishonesty and fabrication of untrue stories by certain elements of the British legacy mainstream media, where back in 1998, I tried to expose Rupert Murdoch's fake sheikh, Mazza Mahmood. It backfired, sadly, a little bit. I landed in prison. I won't go into major detail here because that's covered in the documentary. And it's an integral part of how I became aware that things in the world are not as they seem. And one of the kingpins, one of the key pieces of the jigsaw is that the media, the world media, the mainstream media, I know we've got more and more alternative media now, thank God, but the mainstream media, whether it's television, radio, newspaper, magazines, even websites, the largest proportion of it is owned by a handful of 5 or 6 people. And these control the agenda. And people that are even more powerful than those media owners kind of tell them what to do, because they've got the power to influence the media moguls to go, we would like this political party to be in next time it comes to voting. So they will get the media owners to print propaganda and brainwashing stories, repeated messages to influence, persuade and control the mass populace into thinking the way they want them to, so that they will ultimately then vote in who that media mogul has influenced them to vote for, which obviously they did because they were told to by people more powerful than them. And I saw this from being involved in the media, and my attempts to expose this started in 1998, backfired, landed me in prison for a bit. I'm currently appealing that conviction 25 years on, believe it or not, because more evidence has come to light in my favour, to the point where at the end of September last year, 2022, I filed a case in the High Courts of England against News Group newspapers, Rupert Murdoch's News Group newspapers, for unlawful information gathering against me and being involved in creating a malicious, untrue prosecution and court case against me, which landed me with miscarriage of justice and prison time. People want to look into that more at circusofthemind.net. But it was that insight into things and knowing what had really gone on that made me look at all other areas of life through the eyes of the hypnotist who knows about suggestion, but also through the eyes of someone who, growing up, my hobby was magic and conjuring. And that's all about sleight of hand, but also it's about sleight of mind, distracting people psychologically so they think one thing's happened when actually, in fact, something else has happened. So you can create these magical effects. And that led me to also learn about advertising, which is where I learned massively that people more often than not, make decisions based on emotions rather than logic. It's easier to influence people with joy, anger, fear, and other strong emotions than it is with a logical, analytical argument. And all those things together are what we look at in extreme danger, extreme hypnosis, but we give examples. So we look at religion and how, religion has been used as a tool to make people feel guilty and to control them. How politics, if there was any actual worth in giving us a vote, they wouldn't let us vote. It's an illusion of choice. And it's also a purposeful illusion of choice. So people think they've got freedom, but also so that because different media give different narratives so that people will argue with each other. So it keeps the mass populace divided. So it stops the mass populace united together. It keeps people, that's what the powers that be want. Whilst people are arguing with each other about whether something's sexist or racist or hung up on somebody's skin colour, sexuality, or whatever else it may be that's pinpointed on that day, rather than just accepting the fact that we're all human beings, we all piss and shit the same way, and as long as we don't do anything to physically, emotionally, mentally, or spiritually hurt anyone else, we treat others the way we'd expect to be treated ourselves, then the world would be a better place. Well, they can't really allow that to happen, because if it did, everyone would band together and everyone would be singing from the sort of same hymn sheet, wanting the best for everyone. And then they would not be able to influence, persuade and control and run the show in the manner they do, where they've got maximum control and maximum profits and maximum power, which is what the people at the top have and perversely enjoy.
We will be right back after this message.
Hi, this is Lucy Chow from Robody.com. Here at Robody, we can completely induce and upload all that is currently you into a completely new state-of-the-art synthetic body. Every step of the process, they are custom built to your satisfaction. Are you a pioneer? Our Robodies do not require breathable air or ambient temperature, so living in a hostile environment off-world is absolutely no problem. Choose from thousands of faces, skin tones, hair color, and body types. Use the promo code SLICKPODCAST23 to get a massive 5% discount on all of our new face-off procedures. Robody. There are no limits.
Podcast. The Slick Podcast. Yeah, it's a Slick Podcast. Truly unforgettable topic. This is Slick Podcast.
The motive, therefore, was that genuinely what the title says. It's time for the sleepwalking zombies to wake up. I want my fellow man, woman, living human being, if people aren't identifying as either male or female, but my fellow human being to wake up, stop listening to authority figures unquestionably. Now, that involves common sense, If a security guard tells you to get out of a shopping centre quick, there's been a bomb scare, even if you don't believe him, you know what? It's probably wise to leave, not argue, get out quickly, just in case. So you've got to apply common sense as well. But don't unquestionably accept information from authority figures. And that even comes from me. You know, I'm perceived as being this authority on hypnosis. And, you know, I am. I've got over several decades experience of how people change their lives. But don't believe a word I say. Independently research it for yourself. Yes, get my book, Shitnosis, but try out the techniques for yourself and see whether you get the results that I'm claiming. You will, but don't automatically take my word for it. The trouble is people go to school, and school, people thinks about learning things that are going to help you in the real world. Now, some of what you learn will help you, but let's be honest. Does school teach you about budgeting so you can live on a limited budget? Most schools, no. Does it teach you everyone how to cook on a budget and things, you know, proper life skills? Generally speaking, no. There are some exceptions out there, I know, but generally speaking, they don't. They teach you stuff to fill your brain with some knowledge so you can be like the other robots out there and be subservient and obedient to the powers that be. And they do this by giving you negative red ticks. You've got that, red crosses. You've got that wrong if you get the answers wrong. Or nice green ticks. Yes, congratulations, you've done it right. And then you have exams, you see, where you have to recall. You've got to remember what the authority figure taught you, recall it, and then repeat it in your own words. And the more accurately you repeat what you've recalled, and the more accurate you've recalled it correctly, what the authority figure taught you to remember, the more you're rewarded as, well done, you've got a higher mark in that exam and you're made to feel good about it. But what you're ultimately being conditioned into is accepting what a perceived authority figure tells you, taking it on board without question, recalling it and repeating it and believing it. And there becomes times in later life where that is a dangerous thing to do.
Okay, I've met a lot of very, very well-educated, stupid people in my time, but also some people with seemingly no academia, which I would count as genius. Now, sticking on the same subject, when I gave an example about Michael Jackson, two things. One is MK Ultra, an actual thing, because again, you're qualified to know. MK Ultra, as far as I'm concerned, what I've looked at is mind programming. You've come up with different words. I threw in mesmerism. You're saying MLP. You're saying hypnotist. It's just a trance state. So is MK Ultra true? Because there's videos of the internet where celebrities, air quote, have completely just shut down. And my next part of the question is, would you be able to recognize if someone is in a trance state talking the company line or not?
Is MK Ultra real? Anyone can find that out just by doing a simple search on the CIA's own website. Yes, I did say the CIA. So this is not conspiracy theory. This is fact. MK Ultra was an experimental study research thing that was done shortly after the war when they smuggled over from Nazi Germany people like Joseph Mengele and other people. Yep, they smuggled them into America, and that's provable. And they did all manner of bizarre and quite unethical experiments. And MK Ultra, there was many other different MK projects and associated thing. But MK Ultra was M for mind, K for control, but spelt with a K the German way, because they were using German research people. Mind Control Ultra is actually what it stood for, and it investigated trauma-based mind control. The use of trauma, psychological and physically and hypnotically also through suggestion, trauma being used to influence, persuade and control people. Trauma being used to influence, persuade and control people. And there is evidence to suggest, and I cover this in Extreme Danger, the documentary, that, you can, there's no question about it. It's been proven since that you can create mind-controlled assassins this way, mind-controlled spies who will forget that they know certain things until trigger words are said that flick them into a different alter state personality, because through the trauma-based mind control techniques, their mind has been splintered and compartmentalized into what psychiatry calls dissociative identity disorder or multiple personalities.
Let me just stop you right there. The last couple of years of trauma, the sky is falling. We're all going to die. Is that a fertile ground to have people complete confusion about how, what, and whom they may be?
Some people would see that as unfair, others wouldn't. My thought on it is this. The more extreme a situation is in life, the more it does not fit the pattern of normal. We're used to it everyday life. Like I gave the example of interrupting a handshake, the pattern interrupt earlier. The more traumatic that can be. Now, the fact is each human being is going to react differently, because some people are emotionally or psychologically stronger than others because up to that point in their life, they've not suffered as many traumas or negativity. Or they're stronger psychologically and emotionally because they've learned techniques like the ones in my book, Hypnosis, and they're applying them on a daily basis to get rid of the negative shit they're carrying around and keep installing good stuff. Whatever the reason, some people are going to be emotionally stronger and mentally stronger than others when total unexpected curveballs are thrown into their life, when that pattern is interrupted, when things, some things that some people find traumatic, others go, that's a bit uncomfortable, but we'll get round it, we'll be okay. So yes, there is a percentage of the mass populace that the pattern interrupt, the psychological confusion and disorientation instilled, the fear, false evidence against reality instilled by the media reports, scaremongering and blowing things even more out of proportion than reality dictated was necessary, would have put them in a very vulnerable, confused state over the periods of kind of 2020, 2021, without me using words that can get podcast banned. So, yeah, without a doubt.
No, I totally get that. No, I totally get that. We can't say COVID and we can't say vaccination. I get that. No, I totally get that. It's not a slight on people. It's a question about everybody. To me, the new pandemic is actually insanity. The whole world wants to go to war. The whole world hates a whole race.
Simon, here's the thing. We've been at war for longer than most people will realise. World War III is not a war of guns, bombs, nuclear weapons, although they report on this nuclear threat and all that. They're never going to use them. They don't need to. They're fighting the war, World War III, already through psychological warfare, psychological operations, as they call it. PSYOPs. And that's not a conspiracy theory. It's a fact. I've forgotten what they call it in America, but in England, they've set up what is called the 77th Brigade. And if you Google that, you'll find that the British military has got their own website for the 77th Brigade, recruiting people for what they call psychological warfare, psychological operations, or as so-called conspiracy theorists, truth researchers, shorten it to PSYOPs. That is what it is. It is a battle of the minds, of psychological manipulation, emotional manipulation. That's where World War III is already playing out.
I agree with you 100%, but I would correct anybody, including yourself, on the conspiracy theorists, which I was accused of being 6 weeks ago. And I said, well, here's the thing. A conspiracy theorist, those who conspire, would be those who planned the world to be as it is today. Someone like myself is someone who is a truth seeker and somebody who speaks the truth. I don't conspire to do anything. On a positive note now, you help many people from all walks of life, including some A-list celebrities also. Your book, which is available on Amazon, or one of them, titled The Encyclopedia of Self-Help, Personal Development, Self-Improvement and Change, Work Psychology and Techniques, have been well received. I've had Emma Cameo, homeopath practitioner on my show, helping me improve my health after having COVID, and her treatment has been a massive help to me. I was also joined by Denise Richards, psychic life coach. This screams, I can tell you, of wanting positive change for personal development within and for this show also. However, my biggest problem now is you've touched on it, is the massive addiction to nicotine in the form of smoking. I had stopped smoking for several years, but after a traumatic incident, I confused the want for a cigarette with need. That was my first mistake. Firstly, I understand that cigarettes are poisonous and are slowly ending my health one smoke at a time. But even knowing this, the addiction holds dominion over every rationale or fortitude that I think I have. Bottom line, Jonathan, what is your advice on this millstone I've made for myself?
Okay, well, that's what you consciously believe it is the case. I can tell you now you're wrong. It is never what you're consciously aware of that is actually the reason why you're not able to do something. That is consistently proven itself to be fact for decades for me, for the people who taught me. If you're consciously aware of it and think that's the root cause of the issue, the chances are you're wrong when it comes to habits and addictions. I don't mean normal everyday life situations. Here's why, okay? Habits, addictions, fears, phobias, other things, many other things, just negative manifestations or symptoms of an underlying issue. So the question then is, what is that underlying issue? Well, I'm going to tell you, but at the same time, I'm not going to tell you, because how can I possibly know that without having done work with you? Well, I can know because it'll be the same underlying issues that caused me in my teenage years, before I did work on myself to deal with those traumas that I had and the negativity, that caused me to end up drinking too much and smoking and taking cannabis and cocaine. But then I did certain things, techniques that I teach in my book, Hypnosis, and got over them. Why did they work? Well, that's where the answer to your question comes in, which is this. Every human being is born pretty much as a blank slate. And whilst we're not consciously aware of it often, every human being needs to operate as the best possible version of them. And by that, I mean somebody who does not have habits or, does not have negative habits, or negative addictions. It's fine to have positive ones, but smoking, I think we'd agree, goes under the negative label. Need to feel loved, wanted, needed, appreciated, cared for, cherished, and valued. Now, they sound all very similar, but if you get a thesaurus and check out those words, I'll repeat them again: loved, wanted, needed, appreciated, cared for, cherished, and valued. You'll find they apply to different things. Some apply to self-confidence, some to self-image, some to self-control, aka willpower, self-image, self-esteem, self-control. I'm having a mental block here. Self-image, self-confidence, self-esteem, self-control. That's it. And if there's any fuck up, imbalance from birth up until around the teenage years, when the critical faculty, analytical area, executive function of the brain, call it what you will, I call it the nightclub bouncer of the mind, actually starts its job. Up till then, we're taking on board these mini frozen in time traumas and all the negative and positive programming of our upbringing. And that's going into the personal laptop computer without any antivirus software being there. So we're getting good and bad. So if along the way we get any criticism from a teacher saying we're not good enough, for example, or we're laughed at in a situation that makes us feel embarrassed, them just being two examples of potentially millions of things that could occur from birth to teenage years, it can have a negative impact on our levels of how much we feel or don't feel at that unconscious, subconscious level, loved, wanted, needed, appreciated, cared for, cherished, and valued. And if there's any lacking in one or more of them, it's different for every human being. Some people will have a lacking in all 7. Some it's only in 2. Some it's in 3. But the point is, if there's any imbalance or lacking in any of them, it will have a negative impact on that person's self-confidence, self-esteem, self-esteem, self-control, and the other one. I've had a mental block again. Self-confidence, image, self-image, self-esteem, and self-control. And if there's any imbalance in any of them, it will have a negative impact on one or more of that person's levels of self-worth, self-love, self-respect, and positive selfishness, that ability to look after themselves, to be the best possible them, to then help others. And if there's any negative impact on them, it will ultimately have a negative impact on their self-identity, their sense of self, who they truly are. And that's something that is ingrained at a deep, unconscious, subconscious level of the imagination, the human mind, or as I've metaphorically referred to it, the personal laptop computer, and it will run those negative programs, and those imbalances will play there in the background into adult years. And if they're not dealt with, at some point they will manifest. There's almost like a scream, a wake-up call to the person. They will manifest as a habit. Maybe it's smoking or drinking or gambling, or as an addiction to drugs, or maybe a phobia to something that most other people are not scared of. And it's not really about the habit, addiction, or phobia. It's about the fact that it's the computer's only possible way to try and make the person consciously wake up and realise, I need to do something about this. And that thing that you need to do is to get into your personal laptop computer, allow any frozen in time trauma moments from your upbringing that you're not even consciously aware of. And I'll tell you what I mean by that in a minute. Because when I say trauma, people think of things like child abuse, bullying. And yes, they are traumatic, but they're high on the scale. But all of us have traumatic incidents from the moment we're born to our teenage years and beyond. It's just we don't consciously remember them or recall them as being such at a conscious level in adult life. But they're still affecting us in that frozen in time, rabbit in the headlights, negative manner. And they manifest as habits or phobias, or at least they can in many people. So what you have to do is get into the personal laptop computer by using important seeming ritualistic processes, whether that's meditation, self-hypnosis, guided visualization. It's a way to calm down the conscious mind, distract the critical faculty analytical area, the executive function, enabling you to get into the control room of your mind, release those mini frozen in time traumas, delete the associations to any self-blame, shame, guilt, regret, or underlying negativity that you're carrying around that you're not even consciously aware of, and install positive programs that you can feel calm, relaxed, in control, and positive in all situations. And so that you feel fully, even if it's not, I'm not on about here necessarily on a conscious level, this is so that then you run programs in your unconscious mind that make you feel, or as an automatic reflex action, fully loved, wanted, needed, appreciated, cared for, cherished, and valued, so that your self-confidence, self-image, self-esteem, and self-control is balanced out, so that your self-worth, self-respect, self-love, and positive selfishness is balanced out, so that ultimately your sense of self, your self-identity is repaired, so it doesn't feel like something deep down is missing or out of sync, so that you feel whole again on all levels. And the moment you feel whole again on all levels, and those things have been repaired, you'll find that you automatically will no longer need one, crave or desire for cigarettes or tobacco in any way, shape or form, because you just won't need it. The program causing it to happen will no longer be there in the personal laptop computer.
So would I seek a therapist like yourself that could actually guide me through that? I mean, because I'll wake up.
That'd be an option, but save money. That's what Hypnosis is about, the book. It's £14.70, which is 17 United States dollars. I know that some people say, you can't just read a self-help book and it's going to change your life. And you know what? There's a time I would have agreed with people until we ended up in a world where we can also make videos. And in the book, I put loads of these wonderful QR code things that people can just scan with their smart device, and it'll take them to videos of me demonstrating, teaching them, and talking them through step by step each of the techniques taught in the book, so that whether you are a naturally critical, skeptical, analytical type of person, or you're at the other end of the scale, you're a very creative, spiritual, emotional type, or indeed, if you're anywhere in between on that scale, it doesn't matter, because whether you learn best through reading or listening to somebody or observing them doing it, all of those sensory educational bases are covered by the book and the video codes that are included, so that you can use these techniques on yourself in the safety and privacy of your own home. So, yeah.
Okay, I'll tell you what we'll do then. I will buy your book, and I will give it 6 months of continual practice. So after 6 months, if you consider coming back onto the show, we'll re-examine that. And
of course,
we'll how I've used the book, how it's helped me, or how I couldn't get my head around. So it's not a judgment on the book. It's actually my experience of using the book. So I will do that. I will buy it today. And then in 6 months' time, if you've got the time, you come back on the show, and then we'll see, because I absolutely need to do that.
More than happy to come back on. If you want to book 6 months on it, fine. If, however, as is highly likely, possibly the case, you find as you're reading the book and looking at the videos, you think, fuck me, this makes sense. Why hasn't people explained it this simplistic way before? And you find that it becomes ridiculously much easier than you imagined it would be to make those positive changes. Then you may well find that you're suddenly sending me a message in 3 months' time going, you know what, are you available to come back on now? But yeah, whenever it suits you in a way that feels right for you. The key is exactly what you said. You have to put into action the techniques in the book. If you just read them and go, that sounds like a good idea, well, guess what? Nothing happens. You've actually got to take action. It's not a magic wand, but it can appear to have magical effects, because within you and every listener's potential is the potential to be the best possible them. And the best possible them, or the best possible you, is one who does not need to be, and does not feel the need to be on any level, addicted to anything that can negatively harm them.
That's just brilliantly positive. But I'm going to set myself 6 months. Like I say, I'm doing other things. I'm just going to slot it into what I'm doing, because it's not a case of want, it's a case of need. That was the problem before, because I was actually traveling around Britain with a horse and wagon, and we were nearly wiped out by a lorry, and I needed a cigarette. Hell. Yeah, I needed a cigarette, but it turns out I didn't. I actually wanted a cigarette, and I'd given up 7 years, and I wanted a cigarette, but my brain, or you would say, what
you've described there in that moment of trauma, you've described is a moment of trauma. I think you'd agree, and in that moment of trauma, your brain has done the pattern matching thing I talked about earlier. Mm-hmm. And it's gone through your personal laptop computer, and it's found other times in your life that it's tried to relate to that moment of trauma. And it's found other times in your past life where in moments of trauma, you've had a cigarette. So in that moment, you thought, I need a cigarette. Whereas, as you say, the truth is you thought it because it was being pushed into your conscious mind, the idea, because that's what is in your computer memory banks from the past.
That makes total sense. Let's just move on a little bit now.
Okay.
I've watched an appearance that you gave on television, the television show Without Frontiers, where you took audience members, brought them on stage, and put them into a trance, and had them personified as visiting aliens and their interpreter. That was really good. It was fascinating and really amusing to watch. Can anyone become hypnotized in such a short time, such as on stage? And on the darker side, now we have touched on some pretty dark stuff, but could this be done to, say, a bank teller or a shopkeeper? And an example would be convincing the latter that a £5 note had been offered. A £5 note offered was in fact a 50. So in other words, I would give you £5 to convince you through mesmerism that no, it was a 50.
Well, in relation to Television Without Frontiers, which was a performance art project television series that a Swedish artist and GSE Jeekson put together, and the video is on my Celebrity Hypnotist YouTube channel. Yes, of course you can get pretty much anyone to say and do silly things on stage for if they volunteer to do it. And the reason, but there again, you can also get them to do it even if they don't volunteer, if you go about it in the right manner. You see, a lot of hypnotists say you can't make people say or do things that contradict the morals or the values. Well, the simple answer to that is, yes, you can, but all you've got to do is reframe things that the person thinks what you're getting them to do is something that falls within their morals and values, so that they do it, and they end up then doing something that actually didn't fit in their moral codes and values, but they perceive it as though it was acceptable. An example being, without long-term conditioning and repetition and techniques I won't go into on air because it could be very potentially dangerous, you're not going to meet a complete stranger and within sort of half an hour have them go out as a mind-controlled assassin, shoot somebody, because that would contradict the morals and values. However, if you were so minded to use let's forget the word hypnosis, to use psychological and emotional manipulation, persuasion and influence techniques that some people call hypnosis, then you could get that person to psychologically access the part of their neck-top computer, their imagination, their unconscious, subconscious mind, call it what you will, where they're 5-6 years of age, and get them to imagine that they're playing cowboys and Indians, and describe to them what somebody's going to be in reality wearing, but tell them that whilst they'll see that outfit that person's wearing, their imagination will imagine that that person is the big, nasty, big chief Indian. And they're playing cowboys and Indians and they want to win the game. And when they see that person, they'll reach into their inside pocket, remove the cap gun and bang it, bang, 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 until they've won the game of cowboys and Indians. Now that person then presented with the person dressed the way that had been described, in that state of mind, in the 6-year-old thought process, playing cowboys and Indians, would reach for the cap gun, or what they thought was a cap gun, and fire it at that person. End result, person murdered by the person who it would go against their moral code and values to murder somebody. It's just a different way of getting the end result. But stage hypnosis is a bit different. You know, the simple fact is, I always say, hypnosis, the perfect excuse to make a complete idiot of yourself on stage, have your 15 minutes of fame, have the audience laughing and clapping because you're entertaining them, and yet when you go back to the audience, you can turn around and say, oh, did I really do that? Well, I just couldn't stop myself. The hypnotist made me do it. You've got the perfect excuse to do whatever you want and have your 15 minutes of fame.
Is that so for you and your capabilities? I know that you wouldn't, so we won't use the bank or a shop. Could you walk up to me?
To answer your other bit, on British television show, The Gadget Show, they once asked me if it would be possible for me to get people to reveal their confidential computer passwords without them being aware that they'd done it. And ultimately, I proved that, yes, I could. And I did.
That's really worrying. So if I always say that I'm addicted to my mobile phone. There's no shame in it. I'm addicted to my mobile phone. I would say 99.9% of people are addicted completely. I check my phone when I don't need to. There's no alerts. I'm not looking for anything, but so the light, it's a bit of a technical question, but maybe we'll skirt around find what I'm trying to say. The light from things like television, which I haven't got, but mobile phones Could that be a deliberately designed type of light to keep people in a trance-like state and put something else? Now, it's not a conspiracy. We're not going to go into anything else really, but I just see how addictive I am to my mobile phones and other people. Is there something in the background that we're not seeing? Or we are, but we're not?
Yeah, of course there is. I actually mentioned this in my documentary, Extreme Danger, Extreme Hypnosis. If you search Google for phrases such as nervous system manipulation by electromagnetic fields from monitors or from television screens or from electronic devices, you will see there are numerous, over the decades, different patents on exactly that. Yes, the flickering of lights on a television screen or an electronic device can and have been used to ultimately help bypass the critical faculty, analytical area, executive function that I talked about, the brain, kind of get that metaphoric nightclub bouncer of the mind to piss off on a tea break, so that then the advertising messages go straight to your unconscious, so that the political propaganda goes straight to your unconscious. Yes, it's reality.
So by myself saying I'm addicted to smoking, I know I'm doing the negative there, okay, but let's for example, what I'm addicted to is the alleviation of the craving. So if I say I really enjoy a cigarette, I actually don't. It's the guilt, so I don't look at that. I actually enjoy the alleviation of the craving, which is pleasant with a cup of tea or after a cooked breakfast or something. So looking at a mobile phone is alleviating the craving, which your eyes, your brain and everything need that light, because it's wanting that light. It's not necessarily...
That's an element. Yeah, that's an element of it. I mean, the other large thing is shown on documentaries such as The Social Network is, I've forgotten the name of the other one, but there's, I've had a mental block on the other. But there's various documentaries out there, and we cover it a bit in my documentary on my Celebrity Hypnotist YouTube channel, is that there's a reason why you get notifications every time somebody likes your post or doesn't like it or laughs at it or makes a comment. It's because that is part of the process to get you conditioned to responding to those notifications, to the point where you get addicted and you'll look even when you don't get those notifications, like you said, because you feel good when somebody said something nice about your post. It makes you feel good. And you feel down if you don't get any responses. It's getting people addicted to the distraction of social media, where then in that state of mind, arguably, that's almost could be likened to a trance state where the critical faculties bypassed, suggestions, advertising getting easier. Also, people, it just distracts them from the other things, more important things that are going on in the world. While people are distracted, arguing with each other on social media, for example, the powers that be can pass laws in the Houses of Parliament with very little publicity in the newspapers and very little recognition by most people, because they're too busy arguing about what pronouns people should use or which political party should get in next or some other nonsense.
That was the way I was looking. I touched on pronouns. I wasn't meaning to offend anybody, and nor will I apologise. It's just the way it is. It's as simple as that. Whatever he wants to do, that's fine. But I just saw 2-3 years of trauma having an effect on people. We're very worrying, to be honest. Now, my last question would be something that I have to bite my tongue here. There was a book written called The Secret, okay? And now I'm a
Rhonda Byron.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, I'm a firm believer it's plagiarism, that everything was a thought and every thought could become a thing and this, that, and the other. And people really do need to realize that, people are making lots of money from something that we do automatically. Can you, and they call it now the law of attraction. I get that. Can you just, because you sound like an honest guy and I've really enjoyed our conversation today, can you just break it down for people what the law of attraction is, and also how we can use our minds to manifest anything? And I'm not talking about lottery wins. I mean, we do it every day because people are wasting lots of money on trying to fix, like myself, wasting money. Well, trying to fix problems when you don't really need to, because you look at a car, that was a thought in somebody's head. Now I'm going to shut up and you go for it.
All right, Simon. okay, the law of attraction, it's just another rebranding of things that have existed forever so that people can make money. And they did very successfully. Now, I've read The Secret by Rhonda Byrne, or Byrne, however you pronounce the name. Sorry if you're listening. And it's actually a very good book, and it contains a lot of things that do work if you use them with applied common sense and repetition. But you're not going to start saying to yourself, I am now a multimillionaire on a daily basis and suddenly become a multimillionaire. That's not how it actually works. Although that's the way a lot of people distortingly seem to think that's why it went crazy.
Yes, exactly that. Exactly that. You got to think you're a millionaire and you will become one. That's the bit that annoyed me, because I was trying to tell people, well, not tell people, if we're having a conversation, I always say to them, if they're having a bad day or they're, the life is not good, I always say to them, some take it well, some people don't. But the truth to me, again, plagiarizing, they are the sum total of every single thought they've ever had up to this moment that we are now talking.
Including negative ones, which is why it's very important to reprogram the personal laptop computer, which is something I cover in my book, Hypnosis. I also cover in Hypnosis the roots, the truth behind the law of attraction, in so much as the best book on it is a book called The Master Key by Charles Hannay. And that was written, oh, bloody hell. Do you know what? I'm just going to tap it in here. The Master Key, Charles F. Hannay. It was written in 1912, and it was originally a 24-week correspondence course in how to use your mind. And ultimately, you can buy it for less than a tenner on Amazon now, all 24 parts in one book. If you read that, it wipes the floor with The Secret. It's brutally honest. Yes, miracles can happen, but miracles can only happen after there's been a lot of groundwork. So, there's an old saying, luck is that moment where preparation meets opportunity. You have to put the groundwork in. And I cover it, the way I cover it in Hypnosis is I say, look, people think the grass is greener. They look at these rich people and think, wow, they've got it all. But in my personal experience, many of these celebrities who apparently got all the money and the fame are actually some of the most depressed, insecure, and psychologically vulnerable and mixed up people that you'll ever meet, because they've not, until they get round to dealing with their personal laptop computer. So in terms of the law of attraction from the context of, I am becoming a millionaire, and you're apparently becoming a millionaire, well, somebody once said, what the mind of man can perceive and believe, it can achieve. And the truth is that, yes, if you get to a point where you believe in every fibre of your body that you're worthy of becoming a millionaire, the chances are that you will then end up putting in actions, taking actual physical actions in your life that will change things in your life to set you on a course that ultimately could lead you to the opportunities to become a millionaire. But it's not a snap of the fingers magical thing. Of course it bloody well isn't, although it's marketed by some that way to get money out of people, ironically.
That's why I had to bite my lip. I wasn't trying to slate the author, but there's lots of people who have jumped on the bandwagon and misleading people into something they've been doing all of their lives, misbranding it and misleading it. And wait till book 2, it's even more secrets. No, not up for that.
No, and you know what? I couldn't agree with you more, and that's why I categorically say this. There is no follow-up. I know I've got other books out there, and I know you kindly mentioned one of my other self-help books before, but to listeners, do not buy the other self-help book that Simon gave you the title of earlier. Buy Hypnosis instead. It is a better book. It is cheaper. And you'll never need to buy any other self-help or personal development book. All you'll need to do is put it into action. And there is no upsell after hypnosis. There's nothing at the back going, you now need to buy this video course. No, all the videos are included for free. So I couldn't agree with you more. There's too many people out there who exploit the vulnerable, give them a little few pieces of the jigsaw so they feel a bit better, but don't give them the full jigsaw. Well, I'd like to think I'm giving all the jigsaw pieces, giving you the picture to compare those jigsaw pieces to, but it's down to you to take the time to assemble the jigsaw.
Well, I didn't think I'd have an author come onto the show such as yourself saying don't buy my book, Hypnosis, definitely, because I am definitely going to buy it. And
yeah, but forget the other one. Forget the other.
No,
you don't need the other.
That's fine. No, I'm going to put a link into where we can get that. That is us at the top of the hour, and I've really enjoyed our conversation today and greatly appreciate the time you've given us. Before we wrap up, could you let us know where we could learn more about your work, books, blogs, and other interviews, but also leave us with a positive statement, a last message, if you could, the last time we come onto the show, and I hope it isn't 6 months. Once you've told us that, leave us with a nice thought.
Yeah, indeed. Right, okay, in terms of finding me, if you want to have a laugh at the pictures of me as a clown and see the proof of the stuff I mentioned about my batshit crazy life, that's at magicalguru.co.uk. That's magicalguru.co.uk. If you'd like to watch the documentary that was mentioned, Extreme Danger, Extreme Hypnosis, go to my Celebrity Hypnotist YouTube channel, click on playlists and find the one of the same name. In there, you will also find other interviews on mind control and personal development and stuff. The book Hypnosis is on Amazon and all major book retailers, and I'm on all major social media platforms with the handle at Royal Hypnotist, which is ROYLEHYPNOTIST. So that said, my final thought is this: the grass may appear greener on the other side. But if you stop being jealous of what other people have got, or stop comparing yourself to other people, because it's quite often illusionary in nature. They may have the money and the fame, but they feel insecure and unhappy at home. And you concentrate on being the best possible version of you. Focus on competing with yourself and only yourself on a daily basis to be the best possible you, and start to feed your mind and your brain positive seeds of affirmations on a daily basis, such as Emil Q said, phrases like day by day in every way, I'm becoming better and better, that you will then be starting to water those seeds on a daily basis. And when the seeds grow, when the grass grows in your mind, it becomes greener. Can be as green as you want in your own world when you stop comparing yourself to the illusionary world of what people portray on social media and around you. That's not reality. Reality is feelings. It's feelings you have inside, and you need to focus on you. You are worthwhile. You deserve it. People just don't tend to spend enough time looking after themselves, looking after number one, because on some level, I think it's selfish and negative. No, it isn't. It's not negative or selfish at all. It's the best thing you can do for yourself and for those that you love and respect as well, because they'll love and respect you even more when they see you being happy as the perfect, best possible version of you.
Jonathan Royale, thank you.
Thank you.
And that was the Jonathan Royale interview. I enjoyed our conversation today and found it very informative as well as interesting. I hope you did also. During our interview today, the point that I was making about trauma and the ensuing, as I see it, mesmerism being ramped up through the media, all that is brought to our attention through news, celebrity, whatever that means, and the increasingly blurry company morality piped to us through television, music, ad campaigns, etc., that has and is causing confusion in people is an important issue to address. Bottom line, hypnosis has a powerful effect when used without our consent, and a huge deviancy when we are unaware of it being used that way. To my understanding, hypnosis is a neutral tool of suggestion and subsequent adherence to those suggestions or instructions, if you will. how it is used, and on whom, without permission or any knowledge, mesmerism of the masses is the issue I have. Having said all that, I shall add this positive note. The power of the mind is incredible. On my last episode, I mentioned the book As a Man Thinketh by the late James Allen. I completely recommend reading this book, by the way. The dynamic of self-empowerment and realising that in this moment we are the sum total of all of our thoughts. That to me, again, is the power of the mind, the power of self-suggestion. Every thought, aka decision that we have ever had, defines us now, in this moment. They have brought us together. They have provided us with a home, a life, friends, a job. Everything is a result of your thinking up until this moment. If you don't like something about your life, then change your thinking. This is profound as it is true. So to have one's thought controlled by oneself is far better than having them controlled by others. Think for yourself. Ignore or at least carefully examine the latest trend, setting, hysteria or prejudice. Think for yourself. This truly is individualism. Just saying. I will read Jonathan's book, Hypnosis, and I'll give an honest account of what a meaningful exploration into it did, or rather will be doing for me. I've appreciated Jonathan's time today in giving this interview, and also the time you, my dear listeners, have given whilst attending this cast. Be sure to check out Jonathan's website by clicking on the link below. You can find the Simon Laurie King podcast on Facebook and all the usual podcast providers. If you enjoyed the show, give it a like, leave a comment below, or send the show an email, sokpodcast@gmail.com. But either way, please keep them kind. And so, my friends, it's time for me to go. Until next time, stay safe, be happy, and certainly not afraid. Bye.
Slick Podcast. Keeping it real. And always keeping it groovy.